Hi, welcome to the Coffee with Lisa podcast. I believe that everyone in business has missing structures and endless possibilities to create new opportunities. The challenge is most don't know how to leverage the relationships for a win-win. I believe that your relationships will make the difference in the results you'll achieve, the impact you will have, and the speed in which you will make opportunities happen. I believe that you can see things through, but you often struggle to see through things. I'll make the invisible visible, the complex simple. Because of these beliefs, I created the Coffee with Lisa podcast and have invited the best experts to join me and share their experiences and knowledge with you so you can move faster and gain a competitive advantage in life and in business. Good morning. Thank you for joining me today at the Coffee with Lisa podcast. I have a very special, dear friend of mine who's going to be joining us today. Her name is Patricia Fripp. And for those of you who have never met Patricia, she's a Hall of Fame professional keynote speaker, a skills presentation expert, and a world-renowned speech coach. I'm so excited to have her on today. Welcome, Patricia.
My pleasure to join you as always.
Good morning. So how is business, Patricia, considering what has been going on in the world? I'm quite sure, because I know you travel all over the world, you're so excited to actually stay home for a couple weeks.
I am having a great time staying at home. However, as you probably know, Lisa, for the last 4 years, I have built a speech coaching business in Zoom. I work with engineers and executives all over the world for Silicon Valley companies. So that continues. Many of my clients that I was going to speak at their conference are going virtual. So I'm coaching all their presenters on being virtual presenters. And some of the advice that I give to them might be helpful for your viewers. For example, even if you pre-record a session, and many of my clients do, and then they come in and do Q&A. So it's pre-recorded. They play it as if it was live, and the speakers are there to answer questions in the chat. When you deliver it, it's live. When people watch it, they have the appearance that you are live. And for most people, I say notch your energy up 10%. For some, it might be 20%. And as you are not talking to an audience, you are talking to one person watching you on their computer screen. That means you want to create an energetic intimacy with the person the other side of your webcam.
Absolutely. Well, and you say that you need to increase the intensity of your presentation. Do you believe that's because we are virtual and we need to feel that, we need to take that to a whole nother level in order for us to feel it from the other side of the camera?
Exactly. You're doing this not only to make you feel in the moment, in delivery mode, on stage mode, it's really for the audience, because the purpose of any presentation is to organize, clarify, and intensify the information and experience for the audience. So you're doing it, you're thinking, are they doing this live? Even if they believe it's probably pre-recorded, they believe you're doing it at that moment.
Absolutely.
And that you can create. Pre-recorded.
And so I'd imagine, Patricia, because of what is happening in the speaking industry right now, and the majority of your colleagues are, stuck at home and having a number of their events, their public speaking engagements, canceled or postponed, your business must be getting much busier because people need to learn it. Presenting in the boardroom or in the concert hall or, on stage looks very differently, like you said, than when you're actually presenting virtually. And so is it the belief, or is it true that the majority of speakers are not used to this particular type of presenting?
I can't say the majority, because wise speakers realize that you have to develop an expertise.
Yeah.
And how you deliver that expertise depends very much on how your audience wants to consume it.
Yeah.
There are some of my speaker friends who they make their living large conventions, big stage, and they are magnificent. But for a good portion of the speaking industry, we can deliver our expertise. So, for example, my subject is any part of speaking skills, whether it's selling yourself and your ideas, reporting to senior management, reporting to your board of directors, running team meetings, having sales presentations, or speaking at conferences, or in your training room.
Yeah. Yeah.
That advice I can give online as an interview, such as this.
Yeah.
2, I can deliver it one-on-one coaching. I can deliver it as team coaching. I can deliver it at webinars. I can do it in person. I can do it to a small, medium, or large size audience. So it's the expertise that is important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every other part is a delivery method.
Yeah. Yeah. And so would you say that regardless whether you're a seasoned speaker or you're, a corporate in the boardroom, or you're an up and coming rising star in the workplace, there are some principles and guidelines that you have to follow when you do a presentation, regardless of the level of experience or expertise that you have. So what would be the number one tip or trick or tip?
Never a trick. It's a technique.
A technique that
our audience. Yeah.
Exactly. So what would be the tip or technique that you believe is consistent regardless of the level of professional speaker or non-professional that you are?
Well, there are many.
Yeah.
And the advice that I give about presentation skills is timeless. It works today. It worked a year ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. There are universal principles. Then there is time lead content, which is in the moment now. How do you get up to speed fast using virtual platforms like Zoom? That is time lead. And we put together a recording, my associate Paul and I, on how to use Zoom for business and look like an expert. We give to anyone who wants free. Anyway, the principles for presentation skills that are timeless.
Yeah.
1, if there were one secret, Lisa, on how to deliver a powerful, persuasive presentations, it would be that your subject is of interest to your audience. And you might say, as some of my clients and audience members have, well, I talk about a dull subject like OSHA rules and regulations. How you deliver your information in a way that's going to be of interest to your audience is 1, you need to understand who your audience is, and then 2, speak as an audience advocate. So, for example, presentation skills is my subject. However, if it's for managers, if it's for leaders, it's for salespeople, if it's for professional speakers, then my point of view on that subject is slightly different. So we need to know, and often if you speak to an audience, for example, I will often say to an audience, do you consider yourself a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced speaker? By your own self-evaluation. I'm not putting you in a category. What do you put yourself? So when you introduce your ideas, you might say, well, if you consider yourself a novice speaker, this principle works. Now, intermediate or advanced, it might change this way. So start speaking as an audience advocate and you get more buy-in for your ideas. That's principle 1.
Okay. And, you and I have often talked about how stories sell. And you're often quoted in your Frippism as, nobody can resist a story well told. But a lot of people really have a hard time, including myself sometimes, really trying to determine what's a story that somebody actually even wants to hear about, never mind actually think about, where's that treasure trove, as you call it, of ideas to present to people and stories to present. How do what's the formula to determine what stories are the best and how do you present them properly?
Stories are the currency of human contact.
Yeah.
It does not matter what culture we grew up in. Somehow we felt hearing a story is a reward.
Yeah.
We all had a version of clean your teeth, get in your jammies, get in the bed, mummy, daddy, grandmother, auntie will come tell you a story.
Yeah.
Where you find these stories is you mine your life for the treasure trove of information that's there. So one of the techniques, so for example, whenever I work with a new client, I always begin at the beginning. Where were you born? What did your parents do? What advice did they give you that's helped develop you into the professional you now are?
Yep.
I go through the timeline, and without exception, Lisa, there is a moment in everybody's life that ties into what they are now doing or the presentation I'm helping them with. For example, and this is another way to introduce your idea and make it of interest to your audience. You give a principle or an idea, like Mine Your Life. Go through this. However, unless you give people specific examples so they can see and have a better understanding of it, it's not going to sink in.
Yeah.
And this is the power of the story. Because stories you see, we use words to communicate, but stories we can see. Now, so one speech, I was helping an executive, and he was talking about the big issue. The main theme of this presentation was how our strategy is strong, which means you're at the right place, at the right company, at the right time.
Yeah.
And I asked him, when was the first time you realized the importance of strategy? And he talked about when he was a 14-year-old ball boy before the French Open. And he said people came in to see the French Open and they didn't realize they were going to watch a match of ball boys. And I was playing against my best friend and we were equally matched in skills. And his sister was our ball boy and she wanted her brother to win. So she was sabotaging the way she threw the balls. And he said, Patricia, that is the moment when I was equally matched and at a disadvantage that I realized the importance of strategy. And without exception, as I said, with one gentleman at Cisco, we found out the moment that put him on track to where he is now was when he was at college. And their professor, he was a brand new PhD. This was his first class. And he was so passionate about technology and information and what you can do with information. And until we talked about it for his speech, he said, I never realized that was got me on this direction. And it's a matter of uncovering information. So you see, one, you mine your life, you find these simple stories. They are not complex. Very often these situations are overlooked as what can be significant. But the secret, Lisa, we have to attribute significance to a situation that normally there is none.
Yeah.
And you only get this insight by reflecting and then tying it into what your subject is now.
Makes sense. I know, when I was a few years ago was looking at presenting a TED Talk, and you and I had a great conversation about how talking, never advocating for yourself, always having somebody else advocate for you within your story. And that's really resonated with me, and I use that practice all the time. Can you explain that a little bit more to the people that are watching so that they understand what that really means?
Yes. Stories about people, and people speak, and we want to hear what they have to say. And it is very difficult when you are trying to sell yourself. You know, I help a lot of people with their sales presentations, or even if you're giving a presentation and you're talking about your success. It's better to look at your success from somebody else's point of view. For example, I was helping one woman with a presentation because she was outrageously successful and she got promoted. And this organization, this company, always had their new executives talk. It's the timeline of your life. And like most successful people, they don't like talking about themselves. So I said, look at it from the point of view of the people who influenced you. And in her case, it was her mother. It was a high school counselor that got her on track for where her real talents were. And the third one was her first boss, who was a mentor. She attributed her success from what other people taught her. Now, if you have been very successful, you can always say, if someone says, well, tell us about yourself, Lisa. What you could say is, well, if you were going to talk to my last boss, he would probably tell you, Lisa's worked for me for 6 years, and without a doubt, I have never had an associate that was so creative and innovative and brought a fresh perspective to every project we had to analyze. So you're seeing, you're telling, this could be an interview, or it could be in a presentation or a conversation. You are bringing what I would call somebody else who is your PR agent to speak for you.
Absolutely.
And this is a technique, because you and I both know, Lisa, and both believe, outside the privacy of your own home, all speaking is public speaking. There is no private speaking.
Absolutely.
And most people, it's amazing, really successful people say, what would you like help with? Well, how do I give my elevator speech? Which is crazy, because it's never in an elevator. In other words, how do you answer the question, what do you do? And one technique that I teach in networking is my friend Susan Rowan, who would be a great guest for you. The best-selling author of How to Work a Room. And what we do naturally, we suddenly both realized, people don't know this, we should teach it to them. So for example, if we were at a networking event, convention, a business bureau, chamber of commerce, we go to a lot of charity fundraisers together, and we walk in, separate, come together, separate, come together. And if I were to walk up to you, Lisa, and you were talking to Susan, she would say, oh, Lisa, let me introduce you to my friend, Patricia Fripp. She truly is one of the best speakers and speech coaches in the country. In fact, Kiplinger Personal Finance magazine said the 6th best investment you could make in yourself is to learn presentation skills from Patricia Fripp. And I would say, Lisa, and Susan is far too modest to tell you, she's the best-selling author of 7 books. She's been on the front cover of USA Today and the Wall Street Journal. She's even been in Playboy. And Susan says, yes, but not as a centerfold.
Well, and I'm wearing this hat because you and I both know, because we have a very significant love for hats, that when you make yourself, and we're talking about networking, when you make yourself distinctive within a room and memorable, great things can happen. And
yes, And as we have proved, Lisa, at trade shows, when most people, want to walk by without making eye contact, people walk across the room to your booth and say, "Who are you women? You look so good."
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And it's probably, the funnest I've ever had in my entire life was when we went to the Sherman conference together and worked the conference together. It was very exciting. I mean, when you're talking about 15,000 people and trade shows that are going on and on and on. And for those of you who are watching, people were literally coming up to Patricia and I afterwards and saying, "How do you do this? You're working your booth so eloquently and people are just coming naturally to you." And it is because you make yourself presentable and open to the opportunity to have somebody actually have a conversation with you.
Which reminds me of advice that my mother gave me.
Yeah.
I know she was speaking to both of us, Lisa, and any other woman who is listening, and also men, but I'm looking at women specifically. She said, "Of course, it's the inner you that counts. However, you have to dress up and look good so that you attract people, and then they can find out how nice, kind, smart, and useful you could be to them."
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and you have to add value, right? Every conversation, you've got to add value. So how do Patricia, you've done thousands of presentations over the years. Where do you start with your presentations? What's the first part of your, you call it your Fripp speech model? How does somebody who's maybe not a professional speaker or is looking at maybe doing a presentation at work, where do they start? What does that look like?
Good. And this happens. And in the corporate world, of course, I help my clients prepare a presentation. Really, what I teach them is how to be perpetually prepared, because most presentations in companies, they are frequent and unplanned. In other words, "Lisa, I didn't know you're going to be in this meeting. Can you come up and give us a 5-minute report on your latest project?" And you've got from the fourth row to the front of the room to slot it together. So the format I teach people helps them do it in the moment as well as in advance. So one, who is the audience. Two, every presentation has a premise, a big idea, a central theme. What is the big idea you're trying to get across? And then all the talking points have to prove your premise. So, for example, if your premise were, "With this strategy, we are going to increase sales 20%. Good. Then all your strategies, as you're talking through your points, would be, and that is the first way we are confident we can increase 20%. So you keep reinforcing. And the first 30 seconds and the last 30 seconds have the most impact. Yeah. And even if it is a report to your senior management or you're having a team meeting, have a good opening. "Welcome to the Monday morning team meeting. Let's begin with a new format. Over the last week, you have had successes. And from now on, every morning, we have a meeting. I will challenge you to come prepared with a 1-sentence celebration success you've had the last week." So you see, make it more fun. If you are speaking to perhaps your senior executives, you might begin with, "Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the marketing team's progress." Then put this report into context. As you will remember, in January, you challenged our team too. In March, you heard This was our this was our progress. This was an unexpected challenge, and this is how we overcame it. Now in May, you'll be excited to know that we've accomplished this. We've minimized the challenge, and on behalf of the 16-person dedicated marketing team, thank you for the opportunity too. Yeah, so you see, you've got a format that you just slot in.
It's like an order of, and it's so important that when, like you said, the first 30 seconds and the last 30 seconds really will be remembered, repeated, and make an impact. So the two should tie together, right? Like you open with and you close with.
Yeah. So once you've gone through your talk,
you open with it, right?
Yeah, you can tie into the same idea or formula as you opened.
Yeah.
So again, you might say, again, thank you for the opportunity to update you too. And you review your key ideas, and then your last words linger. What one pithy point. It's rather like a PS of a sales letter. What is the last idea? So remember what? A pithy point at the end, and that will burn your short sentence into the minds of the listeners.
Absolutely. Well, and we never want to use it. And this has resonated with me, and I mean, I always have you on my shoulder when I'm talking, because there are certain words, and we always, you and I, whenever we have a conversation, we bring this up, especially when we're doing a presentation like this, is there are certain words that really, you must be specific with your words. And you've taught me specificity builds credibility, and do not use these words. And it always astounds me whenever I'm having conversation with somebody, because I'll hear the word and I'll go, like, where's Fripp? Is she hiding behind the corner? She's going to knock him across the head. Why is being specific with your words so important?
Of course, it builds your credibility, and it increases your the understanding for the audience. For example, I coach engineers. And one brilliant engineer, and Lisa, these people are so smart. They got more brains in their little finger than I have in my whole body. I just can help them articulate their brilliance. One brilliant engineer, as part of the presentation, was saying, there are two things people love about. And I asked him, which is the number one question I ask all my clients, if it weren't a thing, what would it be? He said, innovative upgrades. I said, there are billions of people in the world. What people love your innovative upgrades? He said, systems administrators. Look at the quality of the communication between. There are two things people love about, and there are two innovative updates that systems administrators love. And in his case, their audience came from 71 different countries. It is important to communicate clearly and concisely when everyone speaks your same language. However, you add a level of interpretation when English is your second or third language. It emphasizes, as we live in a global community, that you need to be specific. You have to be clear. People make decisions on what they believe you said. Wouldn't it be nice if they could really understand what you're talking about?
Absolutely. Well, and And it's really my belief that, a lot of it misinterpretation happens or miscommunication happens because we're not specific with our words. And my daughters, they run around the house all the time. I know, Mom, I know. Fripp says specificity builds credibility. I mean, I've ingrained it in their minds. So thank you very much, because that, is so important. And it's not just about presentations. It's about everyday communication. I mean, we think about when we, use messages on our phones and we're text messaging. If we're not specific, it even gets worse then, because now we're really trying to interpret between the lines of what the words say and what we don't have the intonation in our voice or the our features of our face to tell us that body language of what we really mean.
When I'm writing an email or writing a memo, I write out what I want to say, and then I go back and think, what do I really mean by it?
Yeah.
So you might say, thank you for asking for an approval. What you will find in it. Okay, so I go, what you will find in the proposal. So write down, if it is important, take time to reread your emails. If it isn't important, if it's just to your pals, you might say, do they understand what I'm saying? In a business context, we need to slow down and think, is there any room to be misinterpreted? And the chances are,
absolutely.
Yes. Then you think, how many people who are going to be copied on this, English is not their first language, or they weren't in the first conversation?
Yeah. That's important too, if they weren't in the first conversation. I never really thought about that. English is a first language, especially living here in Canada. We're such a diverse country that, the majority of people that I do talk to have different, original dialects. It's important. So, Patricia, would you say then using the wrong, not being specific with your words is your biggest pet peeve, or what is your biggest frustrating pet peeve that most people do, whether they're a client or a not client, that you wish if you could wave your magic wand, you could change?
There are quite a few. One would be people wing important presentations. Now, as nitpicky as I am, I am the first to say it's much better for a leader or a manager or a parent to be personal than perfect. So often communication departments write speeches for executives. Well, they're fine to do the research for you, but you don't have to read your presentation. Leaders, especially in challenging times, need to be able to look into a webcam or however they're communicating and be real and honest. That does not mean they should not spend a few minutes considering, what do I want to say? What is the best way to come across? And look at a little originality. For example, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you, thank you for attending. Now you look at that. It's not that there's anything wrong with it. However, when you say to an audience, thank you for attending, and they had no choice to be there, I believe there might be a better phrase. And ladies and gentlemen, glad you're here. In any formula, in any situation, it might be polite, it might be expected. However, find a better way of saying it. Welcome to. We are so glad what is the name of the event? Welcome to. We are so glad that you accepted our invitation. Sitting next to you at the other 16 tables are leaders from our community, and charity, whatever. So let people know who is here. So what? Winging
sounds so much better.
Yes. So don't wing it. Be slightly creative. If you sound the same as everybody else, there's no impact. And then I am pleased you're here. Well, look at it from their point of view rather than I am pleased you're here. Thank you for accepting our invitation. How about this? This is our agenda. Why don't you say, I don't care if agenda is on your slide. How about saying, this is what you can look forward to? It's still introducing what's going to follow. But, this sounds good.
Well, and it just adds a unique perspective to, and it really complements and invites your audience in, as opposed to, the negativity of the reason of why they had to be there and they didn't have a choice. They don't want to be there, but it sure invites them to say, you know what, well, thank you for joining, thank you for the opportunity. It just sounds so much better and more pleasing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
If
absolutely.
So if you sound the same as everybody else, you have no advantage. And I don't know about you, Lisa. All I wanted in business was an unfair advantage. And an unfair advantage is not lying, cheating, stealing. Exactly the opposite. An unfair advantage is just finding areas that you can be slightly better than everybody else. And you don't have to be better than everybody else in the world. You just have to be better in this situation. How about panels, absolutely. For example? I help a lot of clients. We're going to have a panel discussion. Need to understand it. But most people who are going to be on a panel think, it's only 5 minutes. I can do that. No, I don't think so. You need to be very clear. And when I coach people to be tight and clear with their 5 minutes, I find they get more questions from the audience than anybody else. Because how many people have you heard when they say, we're going to ask our panelists to deliver a 2-minute opening statement? How many people say, I can't say anything in 2 minutes? Why are you wasting your valuable time talking about what you can't do rather than thinking about what pithy point can you really make in 2 minutes?
Yeah. Well, and keep, somebody once told me, and I don't remember who it was, but said, keep it simple, stupid. And, that really is true because, you only have 2 minutes. So focus on one point, keep it simple and keep it direct to the audience and that it pertains to them specifically.
All right, Lisa, let's change that into a new Frippicism.
Okay. Yay.
Keep it specific, superstar.
I like it. I'm going to write that down.
Keep it short and specific, superstar.
Yeah, I like that one. That one's a good one. So, I can remember we were at Lightspeed's office and you were taping some video, and every time that you taped, and I'm thinking, how does she, she's so smooth and she's in front of the camera and it seems like she's not even, nervous or what have you. And I giggled, and I always think about this because every time that you did your presentation in front of the camera, it was very specific about the content that you were videoing. You kind of did the old shake and you got, your nerves taken away. So you still get nervous. You still,
that wasn't a matter of not being nervous. So what you did, you're shaking the stress out of your body. You're warming up, so that you are more you're more relaxed. So it's very important.
Right.
So that's not nervousness. That is getting any tension and pressure out of your body. Shake your hands. You want gestures to look natural. Shake all the stress out of them. It's an old acting technique just to relax to go on stage. Now, here's another point, because at light speed, and this is when I was recording my online learning Fripp virtual training, that is all teleprompted. And what you need to do, and more execs who are having messages have to get used to a teleprompter. You need to write your sentences, short sentences. Now, when you're speaking to be remembered and repeated, I always suggest shorter sentences, one idea a sentence, because the written word is for the eye. You can always go back and reread. The spoken word is for the rhythm. And you need shorter sentences, which gives you time to pause. Think of it this way. Speak in verbal punctuation. Where would there be a comma, a period, a new paragraph, and exclamation mark? So would you put underline, exclamation mark? It's so not only is the comma, the period, and the new paragraph a length of pause. If you would write an exclamation mark, then you put that energy into your voice. Now, looking at a teleprompter, short sentences, and it has to sound spoken. The example I like to use, if you go to a bookstore for a meet the author, when I say traditional authors will read their books, they'll read a segment from their books. You take a professional speaker like our friend Tony Alessandra, Scott McCain, they're going to tell you stories from the book. So it's the difference between a speaker who writes and a heavy-duty writer who writes.
Yeah. So would do you still get nervous when you speak, Patricia? You've just mastered.
Oh, yes. And you were saying about thousands of speeches, as well as I can work out, probably 3,586 live presentations, and now hundreds and hundreds virtual and online.
Yeah.
Of course, I started speaking when dinosaurs roamed the earth.
I don't know about that.
Well, yes, certainly. There are circumstances. If a convention has brought you in and your message has to set the tone for the entire meeting, that is a big responsibility. If you're coming into an audience where, well, you can't guarantee, and this is part of keeping you focused. You cannot just, you build on your past successes, but you can't take it for granted.
So it's not really the speaking part of it that makes you nervous. It's the responsibility part and making sure that, you're delivering to the expectation. But I know you, and I know you well. You don't just deliver expectation. You always exceed expectation. And so would it be safe to say that that's really what makes you more nervous than the actual presentation itself?
I would not have articulated it that way, but that is right. It's the responsibility that the client's given you, because there really is, in the words of Naomi Rhodey, who was a past president of NSA, there is a privilege to the platform, which professional speakers take very seriously, which is why when I have sat in meetings and I have seen senior level people at a head table, and they're obviously writing the notes of what they're about to say. And in this one particular meeting I'm thinking of, their meeting budget was $6 million. They didn't have to hire me, but you would think with an investment of $6 million, the people at the top that might only speak for 5 or 10 minutes would take it more seriously than sitting at a head table writing their notes before they go on. And I know that's true because there's one person I'm thinking of walked up with the notes that he just made.
It blows. It really, we've been to presentations together, and we've been to presentations and conventions and conferences apart. And the one thing that probably bothers me the most is the lack of respect to the audience that a speaker gives when they walk on stage unprepared. There's nothing worse, because I'd give anything at that moment to be on that stage. So I think not only do you respect as an attendee, but you also respect those who are trying to be professional about the speaking business.
And today's audiences, more than any before, Lisa, are stimulation junkies with shorter steps.
Yeah.
Let me say that again. Stimulation junkies with short attention spans. They have their mobile device, and if you can't captivate them, they are checking their Facebook or sending a tweet, and it might not be of a pithy point you made.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to close the show, and I always close the show of Coffee with Lisa with one question. And if you were to give your younger self, your 20-year-old self, one piece of advice, what would that be, Patricia?
Embrace technology sooner.
Can you expand on that?
I built my speaking business before we had the internet, email, social media, YouTube. And as technology and computers became more important, my assistant was much better with the technology than I was. I should have taken a laptop on the road earlier and put as much. I did. Once I made the decision, I focused very clearly on it. I used to go to all the technical sessions at the conferences I was speaking at. Even though I didn't know what they were talking about, you sit in enough, it begins to make sense to you. I would have just begun that process a couple of years earlier than I did.
Yeah. Well, and today now, I mean, that's great advice, because technology is changing the landscape of not just business, but our personal lives so fast that, it's almost, it becomes overwhelming sometimes. So
I remember one of my earlier IBM conferences. I was speaking there and I listened, and one of the executives made a comment that I've never forgotten. It was true then, it's true now, it will be true in the future. Technology does not drive an enterprise. Relationships do.
Yeah.
However, the use of technology can help you support driving the relationship. I would always rather have a Zoom meeting than a telephone call. This way you can see that people are paying attention. They're not doing their email, which is another reason why with the Fripp virtual training, it's very interactive. Every few minutes, I can ask you some questions. It's not a matter of having it on and just listening to it. You have to be engaged. It's better to learn any skill in short incremental segments than just think, oh, I can have it on while I'm doing my email and absorb it. That's not true.
Yeah. Well, and if you really want to get the breadth of the knowledge and apply the knowledge that you're actually trying to retain, then you should be focused just on the content and not on the 7 other things that you're trying to do at the same time. Well, thank you, Patricia, for joining me today. I appreciate it. And I'm going to go have another cup of coffee. And thank you very much, and take care, and God bless.
Always a pleasure. And remember what Fripp stands for. Frequently reinforce ideas that are productive and profitable.
Fantastic. Thank you, Patricia.